You're listening to LiveWild Radio, the part-time adventure podcast.
Join us as we explore how outdoor adventures build mind, body, and spirit.
You are listening to LiveWild Radio. This is a solo episode. We've never had one of these before, but Catherine's off visiting her mom, and we've asked you guys to send us questions about fitnessy things, and because I am the coach, we figured it was fine for me to answer them because I'd do most of the talking on a question and answer about fitness episode anyway. I think Catherine's quite happy just to let me natter on. We won't make a regular thing of these, but unless you guys like them, and then I'll keep answering your questions. So today's episode is brought to you by Great Lakes Gear. They're our pals we get all of our fitness equipment from. So whether you need kettlebells, barbells, dumbbells, our favorite pull-up bar, they've got gymnastics rings, clubs, maces. They're basically a big steel handle with a shot put welded on the end and different weights. You want to feel like a damn barbarian? Go out in the backyard and swing one of those around, and you will get strong, or you will get bruises if you don't know how to do it properly. But Great Lakes Gear makes great stuff. Prices are awesome. They have regular sales. And for our listeners, if you go to Great Lakes Gear, Girya, which is Russian for kettlebell.com, and use promo code LiveWild at checkout, that's one word, you'll get 5% off. And a little bit comes and helps us. So, yeah. And you guys, I just want to thank everybody, too, because people have been using the promo code when they've been making their purchases. And all of that helps because putting on a podcast isn't free. So it's not like we're going to get rich off it, but it helps offset some of the costs, which we're always happy about. Now, today's episode is, like I said, it is submitted questions people have about fitness. So I will try to not be too long-winded in my answers, but some of the things we might need to get a little bit specific on. Most of them I haven't read yet. We'll see how well this works. Maybe I should read them ahead of time. But we just sort of compiled some questions, and I'm going to answer them. So, first one, Paul sends us a question. He asks, I've only got 30 minutes during the week, 30 minutes 3 times during weekdays, plus I've got a little bit of free time on the weekends. How do I best train for hiking and backpacking? If during the week, like the work week, you've only got 3 30-minute sessions, and that's actually pretty common for a lot of people, because if you got a job and you got kids and you got the grown-up responsibilities, but you still want to be in half-decent shape for when you have time to get on hikes on the weekend, first, your weekend hikes are part of your training. You get in during the week what you can, and I'll get into the specifics of what that is. And then the weekends are when you get to do your longer training. So whether you get out for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, think of, basically the weekend is when you get to do your long sessions. So your activity that you want to be doing is also part of your training program, first off. So when you're thinking about that, think about, as time allows, to gradually make your weekend hikes longer, so that you're building some capacity there. And then during the week, I would do a combination of strength training movements, but done, and people have heard me talk about this before, but if we want to be as efficient with our time as possible, your 5 primary movement patterns. So I would do full body workouts 3 days a week. And the numbers actually work out very well. So if you've got the 5 prime movements, which are a pushing movement, a pulling movement, that's upper body, a squat, a hip hinge, like something like a deadlift or a kettlebell swing, and some form of loaded carry, then you run into the thing of if you're going to do a 30-minute workout, take 5 movements divided by 30. That means you can do each movement for 6 minutes. Now, obviously, we're not going to do each movement for 6 minutes unbroken. But to give you an idea, a workout I just did yesterday, I set my timer for 30 minutes, and I just rotated through 5 exercises. So that ended up being 6 sets of each exercise. So I did a set of 10 kettlebell swings, which is my hip hinge. Then I not immediately, but so that takes about 20 seconds. Then the rest of the minute was my recovery. Then minute 2, when the timer beeped, I dropped down and did 15 push-ups. And that takes, about 30 seconds. Maybe 35, something like that. Then minute 3, I did 10 goblet squats, which takes about 30 seconds, give or take. And then I did minute 4 was a set of 5 pull-ups. And then set 6, or set 5. Yes, 5. We got 5 movements. I just did 30 seconds of farmer's carries, like 30 steps roughly. So I just picked up a kettlebell in each hand and walked. So if you're doing this at a commercial gym, then maybe what you want to do is instead of 6 sets of each exercise, do 5 sets of each, but do all of the same exercise back to back. If you do 5 sets, then you have 1 minute to switch stations in between, if that makes any sense. So you do minute 1 to 5 would be doing kettlebell swings for 5 sets. And then basically minute 6, between the end of 5 and 6, you switch stations, which can be just dropping down to do push-ups. You do your push-ups. So it just depends on the gym. Like if it's busy when you go, having 5 stations set up sometimes is frowned upon. So you might move from movement to movement. If you do movements that you just need dumbbells for, you can be pretty effective that way by, just got to quickly switch and grab a different pair. So maybe you do, instead of a kettlebell swing, you do a Romanian deadlift with dumbbells. You do a goblet squat with a dumbbell. You do dumbbell overhead press, dumbbell bent over rows, and a farmer's carry. That's another simple way to do it. So that every minute you're getting a set in. So in 30 minutes, you did 30 sets. You did your whole body. And because you're not having long rests in between, you're going to end up getting a cardiovascular benefit out of it as well. So this isn't the best way to build muscle. It's not the best way to build cardiovascular fitness. It's not the best way to build strength. But it is one of the best ways to improve all of those things at once in a limited time window. So that's one of the things I love with these workouts because, if you were a power lifter, it's not the way to train. If you're a marathon runner, it's not the way to train. But some of these things you can't do on just 30 minutes 3 times a week, plus whatever you get in on the weekend. So that's just the reality of it. But you can make some really nice fitness gains and strength gains training this way. And, like I said, we're a big fan of having a home gym. Because the great thing is if you have a home gym, you cut down on the travel time, so you're not having to go to the gym, you're not having to get changed, you're not having to change afterwards and drive home. because a half-hour workout at the gym really is going to take a minimum of an hour or longer when you factor all of those things in. Whereas literally we can walk out to the dining room, which is now our gym, in your underpants in the morning. And as long as you got the front window or the drapes closed, and sometimes I don't even give a shit, you can just get your workout in. And, literally a half-hour workout takes 40 minutes, including my warm-up, when I'm pushed for time. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy with basically, we're not going to call it minimalist because the whole body gets hit and all the systems are trained. But if you get a full body workout 3 times a week, like on non-consecutive days, ideally like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then get out for some hikes on the weekend, particularly if one of your hikes on the weekend, if you're able to do both days, but even if just one, you start adding some weight to your pack beyond what you'd normally bring just for your gear that you'd bring on a hike, and gradually increase both the duration of your hikes, like how far you go, and add a little bit of weight, that ends up being a great way, combined with what you do during the week, to build fitness, that when you, say, do go on that summer backpacking trip for a week, or even a long weekend, you've got the capacity, even though you don't have a lot of time to train. The other thing that I can't state enough is, as much as you can, like if you work an office job, then try to get as much walking in during your day as possible. Take the stairs when you can. When you go for lunch, walk if you can walk to grab something rather than, take the elevator or drive. Anytime you can get some extra movement in. That I can't speak highly up enough. Particularly, say something like every time you eat, like if you eat 3 meals a day, try to get a 10-minute walk after each meal. It's not a lot, but there's a number of health benefits that come from it, and that adds up, right? Because we need to climatize our body to moving and being on our feet. I work, in an outdoor store where I'm on my feet all day, so I run into the thing where if I'm going, on a backpacking trip combined with whatever I do for training and all that kind of stuff, just the acclimatization to be on your feet all day, I've got already just because I'm on my feet every day anyway. But if you work in an office, just being on your feet all day, like you will on a backpacking trip, can actually just be a new stimulus that you're not used to. So in addition to whatever you do for actual quote-unquote workouts, try to get in as much walking as you possibly can. Even if it's broken up into little bits, right? Your body will thank you for that. So, yeah, thanks for that question. Then Jack wants to know about supplements. Do they work? Specifically, he's asking about creatine and protein powder. So, before I get into the specifics of that, big picture on supplements, and I've sort of used this one before, but it's such a great little bit that I came up with that I'm going to use it again. I don't care. So if you go to the average, bodybuilding / supplement / health food store, and you were to only stock it with what had scientific evidence behind it. And when I say scientific evidence, we're talking solid, peer-reviewed, statistically significant effect, repeatable, measurable, all of the different things. Not like there was one rat study, in 1972 that showed, this tiny effect in Petri dishes. So we're building a whole supplement behind that, as if it's scientifically, proven kind of idea. if we were to only put products that stood up to that rigor of being worth it because it did something beneficial, it would fit in a phone booth. Like, that's how small, it'd be like a kiosk store. Most things that are sold as health boosters, performance boosters, that are going to get you lean, that are going to get you, jacked, bigger muscles, all that kind of stuff, are mostly snake oil. Because the issue you run into is if things lived up to their marketing, then everybody would be big and jacked and lean, and they would look like they take steroids, because that's the way a lot of this stuff is marketed. The reality is, whether it's pre-workout drinks, they might get you jacked up for a workout. And if that's the only way that you can work out, maybe you should focus on getting better night's sleep, those types of things. But most of the health supplements out there, or performance supplements, all this kind of stuff, the effect is at best negligible, and generally not worth the money. For just general health, a few things that have some good efficacy behind them, and they're relatively inexpensive. Getting adequate vitamin D, something like 4,000 or 5,000 IUs a day. Vitamin D is stupid cheap, and especially in the northern hemisphere where we have winter, at least half the year you don't get enough sunshine. And sunshine's how your body makes vitamin D. Vitamin D is involved in a ton of chemical processes within the body, so inadequate levels of vitamin D also translate into inadequate levels of, various hormones in the body. Like low vitamin D tends to be lead to lower testosterone levels in people. Low levels of vitamin D tend to also have negative correlations as far as COVID outcomes. That was one of the ones that they found. So by getting, some vitamin D in, it's cheap, and beneficial. Magnesium is another one. Majority, because 58% of people in North America was one of the studies that I'd read, are deficient in magnesium. And again, magnesium is one of those low-hanging fruit things because it's cheap, and it's involved in a bunch of different chemical processes in the body. So inadequate levels will lead to, obviously, things like muscle cramps. You don't sleep as well. It's involved in the manufacturing of the DNA repair enzyme, which, if you want to live longer and feel better, that's kind of important. Inadequate levels of magnesium are also linked to lower testosterone. So there's a bunch of things that it will improve if you were deficient. Basically getting either a mixed source or where it's multiple types, or the biglycinate version, from everything I've read, is one of the most absorbable. But if you get a mix that's got some magnesium oxide, but that's the least absorbable version, but it's the cheapest, then magnesium citrate, magnesium biglycinate. If you get a mix that's got sort of all of them in it, that's not a bad thing. But again, magnesium. Then fish oil, 3 to 5 grams a day. Live with the fish burps, but good for your heart, good for your joints, anti-inflammatory. Again, relatively cheap. Those are the three I always call kind of the low-hanging fruit. If somebody wants to live longer and healthier, especially if you're trying to lose weight, look up the information on the extract berberine. It's has good evidence behind moderating blood sugar, having cardioprotective benefits, moderating insulin levels. But that's, with any of these, I'll always put the caveat out there. Talk to your doctor. If you can, go get nutritional, like a blood panel workup, so you actually see what you're actually deficient in. Because any of these nutrients, like magnesium or vitamin D, they're kind of easy ones because the majority of people are deficient in them. But that doesn't mean you want to take mega doses. And one of the things you'll run into is by getting tested, then you're not guessing. You actually see what you're actually low in. Maybe you're low in some B vitamins, B12, whatever it happens to be. So it's useful to know what you're deficient in. And for women, because of their menstrual cycle, it's not unusual to be low in iron, so that's a smart one to get checked. And then taking some high-quality iron supplements. Again, iron can be toxic if you have too much. So go to your doctor, get tested, and then, something like 25 milligrams a day generally would be a pretty safe bet for most women without being too high. But that's from a supplement standpoint, before I get back to Jack's question, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit of just general health. And so now to the specific question about creatine and protein powder. Specifically, do they help build muscles? Do they help with performance? So we'll take creatine first. So creatine monohydrate is actually one of the most studied performance-enhancing supplements out there. A lot of positives that come out of it. Generally, you will see an increase in strength, an increase in lean body mass, a general performance increase in short duration, high output. So sprinting, jumping, weightlifting, hence the strength increase. And it turns out to have things like some neuroprotective benefits. So quite a bit of science on it. It's not really beneficial to endurance athletes as much as we'd like it to be. But if your goal is to perform better in the gym as far as strength goes, to lift a little bit more weight, build a little bit of muscle, then creatine can be of benefit to you. And the way it works is by taking 5 grams a day, and there doesn't have to be any specific timing or anything like that because it's about saturating the tissue. So it's just consistently taking 5 grams. If you do a protein shake, dump it in that, dry scoop it and wash it down. It doesn't taste really much like anything. So 5 grams a day, with one little scoop. You'll run into the thing where over 7 to 14 days, it will start to build up in your system and increase the stores of creatine phosphate in the muscles. And generally what it'll translate into is you got an extra rep or two. So instead of a weight that you could do 10, you might have enough, juice in the muscles, the actual, specific energy to get an extra rep or two. And because you've got a little bit higher levels of creatine flowing around your system, I find that your recovery for your next set as far as the muscles go, to being able to contract hard again, is fractionally quicker. So your workouts end up being a little bit better quality, you know, and if your workouts over time are slightly better quality, like maybe, you know, 2 to 5% better, you're just able to get a couple more reps, you know, you're able to do better on your subsequent sets, you're more likely to create a stimulus that in, you know, a month, 2 months, 6 months adds up to a sizable difference. So number one, the safety tends to be pretty good. There doesn't appear to be a, you know, when they test creatine in studies, it appears to be quite safe. People don't tend to have a lot of adverse reactions, other than some people tend to get a little bit, it's a little hard on their stomach, or they can get gassy, or some people, and this varies individual to individual, some people find that they get diarrhea. So if you're one of those, you know, obviously taking it with food can help, you know, but generally it's very well tolerated. So if your goals are to get a little stronger, you know, be a little faster, a little more explosive, you know, anything that's short bursts, then adding creatine as a supplement won't hurt, and it definitely, the evidence points to it being of benefit. And then using it long term, like I said, the neuroprotective and cognitive enhancing abilities, you know, it's something that they're researching, but it's very interesting. If something can keep your brain working better longer, kind of an interesting little longevity thing. One of the downfalls, though, is it does increase intramuscular water retention, which is part of that lean mass that you put on. And so if you're trying to get bigger, that's great. But if you're doing anything weight class oriented, the problem, of course, can be now you're heavier. And of course, it makes you a little stronger. But say for somebody like a rock climber, I haven't seen enough evidence sort of looking at that specifically on whether the strength increase will more than offset the few extra pounds of water weight you'll hold within the muscles. So that's sort of something that needs more future research, right? Because anything that's a gain in one area but a decrease in the other, it'll take a bit of study to figure out whether that's a net gain or not. You know, obviously, if you're a football player, a hockey player, anything explosive and hard, where if you're a little bigger, it's not a drawback, then those are kind of easy. But for things like mountain biking, which is obviously an endurance sport, there isn't a huge benefit. Backpacking, same idea, although it'll benefit you in the gym from a strength standpoint. And then for rock climbing, where your power to weight ratio is really important, that's where it probably is either net neutral or maybe a slight net negative. You know, because it's one of those things where it will increase your strength, but you know, whether it's enough to offset that weight gain, it's hard to say. And the other thing Jack was asking about was protein powder. And protein powder is just food. One of the things, if your goal is to either maintain or build some muscle mass, the evidence would suggest, do you like the way that I sort of hedge myself there because that's sort of science. It's not like this is the concrete way to do it. It's like we're just looking at the evidence. Getting in 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So I like to just make things simple, so I just round it to 1. 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight can be a giant pain in the ass because if you think of just from an eating standpoint, you get sick of eating chicken and eggs and steak and yogurt and, cottage cheese and basically the different things that have a lot of protein in them. So protein powder, while isn't going to magically build you muscle, it can be a convenient way to get your protein intake up without making you hate eating. So I would always recommend for anybody who has a hard time getting enough protein in, then after workouts, drinking a protein shake with a high quality whey protein isolate, unless somebody's got like a lactose problem or a lactose intolerance. Even though like an isolate, most of the lactose is out of it, it can still cause sort of some gastrointestinal issues for those who are sensitive. But having a quickly like a whey protein isolate or hydrolysate or hydrolyzed, yes. They're very quickly absorbed. So after working out, when you've broken your muscles down, having a protein that your body can absorb quickly can certainly, assist with the recovery side of it. And it can make it an easy way, like, without having to starve yourself of other nutrients just to get enough protein in, because to give you an idea, like, if you're 180 pounds, so you want to get 180 grams of protein in, the average, protein powder is, we'll call it like 30 grams per scoop. Well, that's the equivalent of 5 eggs. 5 eggs are 600 calories, like 5 large eggs. Whereas 1 scoop, of protein powder, because it's just pure protein, is very low in carbohydrates and fat and may only be 150 calories for the same amount of protein as 5 eggs. So if part of your goal is to lose body fat, you need to be in a caloric deficit. So having adequate or a lower calorie protein source can be less expensive than just buying more chicken breasts, or lean ground beef or any of that type of thing. Plus, obviously, you don't have to prepare it. You just dump it in a cup with water or a mug, a shaker cup, shake it up, drink it down. So it's an easy way to get some protein in. But like I said, there's nothing magical about, protein powder versus chicken breast versus anything else. So, useful if your goal is to lose body fat in addition to building muscle, because it's a way to get enough protein in without extra fat and carbohydrate calories. For people who don't want to be just constantly eating, it is a easy way just to add some protein to your diet. Plus, because a lot of the flavors are actually quite tasty, when your, goal is fat loss, it can be a way to, because protein's filling and it scoop of protein, shake it up and drink it down, kind of all, shake-like, can be the thing that keeps you from snacking because you're feeling full. That's a long-winded way of answering Jack's question about supplements. if anybody's got questions about specific supplements, send those in. If you go to our website, livewildradio.com, you can contact us. We've got it on the main page, and I think we got a contact us button, so you can reach out to us that way. Send us a message on Instagram at LiveWild Radio, or on Facebook at LiveWild Radio. We're always happy to have people interact, and if you like what we're doing, let us know. If you think we're full of shit, let us know that too. Although don't be too mean, because I have thick skin, but it probably hurt Catherine's feelings. So just say mean things about me. So next question is from Mark, and Mark wants to be we'll call him a modern Renaissance man. Mark's a rock climber who also wants to train for a marathon. So his question is, I want to do two things that seem to be at odds with each other. I want to get better at rock climbing, which I really love, and I want to challenge myself by running a marathon next year. And by next year, I'm not sure whether he means this year, because the question came in last year. Either way, can you give me some pointers on how to put together my training so I can get better at both, even though it seems to be disparate goals? He didn't say disparate, but I did. So a couple of different things. Number one, understand that you're not going to be able to be your best at either thing, working on both at the same time. You can get better at both of them, but in training there is the law of specificity. So to make it the super dumb version is you get better at what you do a lot. The more specific is, you have specific adaptations to impose demands. If you want to get good at a long duration aerobic activity, there's got to be a fair amount of long duration aerobic training. If you want to get good at an activity that requires short to medium bursts, particularly of upper body strength, because Mark doesn't specify what type of climbing he does, whether it's bouldering, which is super short and explosive, or roped climbing like sport climbing, or even longer like trad, big wall, which is actually more of an endurance activity. So I'm just going to treat it like he's a sport climber. So, you're talking climbs that are not hours long, but not 30 seconds to a minute long, if that makes any sense. Kind of that middle zone. And with climbing, obviously, where the differences or the challenges are compared to training for a marathon are going to come into recovery ability. Because obviously climbing, while it uses the whole body, is most challenging on the grip and upper body. Very rarely do people fall off a rock climb or find themselves unable to do a climbing route because their legs were too weak or too tired. There's the occasional thing that'll happen, especially with some like weird off-width climbing or some weird stemming problem, where you got to do the splits in a corner or something like that. But generally, it's grip and upper body strength and muscular endurance is the limiter when it comes to climbing. Whereas with marathon running, it's going to be aerobic fitness, and localized muscular endurance, predominantly in the lower body and core. So the thing that I would say is that if you give yourself long enough to prepare, and by that I would say ideally 6 to 8 months, you can see a sizable improvement in both things. What I would probably do is divide your day, and I'm going to break this down into a perfect world, realizing that life is never perfect, and sometimes we have to, just adapt on the fly. But I would recommend climbing 3 times a week, with the idea that sometimes you're not always going to be able to, but getting at least 2 in. Running 3 times a week, with the idea of one session being a longer run. Just gradually increasing that volume on one session a week. And then getting 3 strength training sessions in. And if you're each week able to only get 2 of each, so it's 6 sessions total, then you're still going to make progress. It's just sort of not ideal. And the thing you're really going to have to pay attention to is your recovery. Like, you are going to have to be a monk about but going to bed early, getting your nutrition in, relieving stress in the rest of your life. Obviously, if you were working a full-time job and you've got kids, and family and all the different things, this is going to be more of a challenge than if you were 20 and have basically all your non-working time is your own. Because that's the reality of these things where, if you're going to do an event, like a respectable marathon time, is going to be, in that 4-hour range. Well, to be able to just do anything for 4 hours, like, run 26 miles in 4 hours, you're running into the thing of needing to be going, about 6.5 miles an hour, which isn't a super fast running pace. But, to do that for 4 hours straight, is going to be challenging. And there's nothing saying, basically he didn't give us any information. This is always one of the things that you run into where the more specific information we have, the more specific our answer can be. But I would always err on the side of starting low, and this goes because we don't know how much climbing you've been doing, don't know how much running you've been doing already, and gradually building, right? Because what we need to do is build a work capacity so that your body can recover from more, tolerate more work. And that's a slow process. A big part of that process is how old you are. You take a 20-year-old and put them into boot camp in the military, and you can kick the shit out of them, and they just adapt. Whereas you take a 50-year-old and do the same thing, and they don't survive the first week if they're not already in great shape. Just because the tolerance, the innate recovery ability is less as you get older. But just as a general guideline, I would run into the thing of 3 climbing sessions, 3 running sessions. 2 of the running sessions would be, still everything, just keep it purely aerobic. But 2 of them I would, sort of start at 20 minutes and gradually build those up to an hour. And then your weekend one, if you've got a little more time, over, 6 months, build it up. And don't be afraid of when you're starting to physically get tired, dial everything back for a week. Let your body recover. And then start building again, right? The whole periodized approach. It's like build, recover, build, recover. And as you get closer to the date, I would de-emphasize the strength training and transition it into more maintenance. And it's the same thing. Like the 2 or 3 weeks before your marathon, I probably wouldn't climb at all, or climb very little. So it's one of those things. The further you are out from an event, the more general your training can be. The closer you get to an event, the more specific it needs to be. That last month before, because the week before I would just ease off on everything, right? Just to let your body recover. I'd run regularly, but keep it short. And then you run into that thing where, right now, because let's say you've got a event in August that you sign up for. I would look at September, because I find the summertime's too bloody hot to be out for run for hours anyway, but that's just me. Right now it's just general fitness, right? GPP, general physical preparedness, climbing, do some, weighted carries and kettlebell swings, right? The weighted carries really great for all the postural muscles. The kettlebell swings or Romanian deadlifts are great for the posterior chain, the hamstrings, the butt, lower back. All of that stuff is awesome for helping your running. You just don't want to do too much of it as you get closer to the event, if that makes any sense. Right now, we're just about making the structure and building your work tolerance so that you can tolerate the workload as you get closer to the event. There's a concept called maximum recoverable volume, MRV. So the idea is you want to start at less than, like an amount you can recover from, and gradually each week just, 5 or 10% increase the overall volume you're doing. And 4 or 5 weeks of that, and then you're going to start to be fatigued. Ease off, right? That's where you have the deload week. You dial everything back, maybe, shorten your runs, cut out a day of climbing, cut back on the volume of your strength work. Just let your body kind of, recover. And you'll feel when you're ready to build again, because, the first few days you're like, oh God, I'm so glad I can ease off. And then as the fatigue goes away, you start to realize your fitness. It was hiding because you were tired. And then you start feeling like almost chomping at the bit to go again. And that's when you start building again, right? And as long as it's sort of steady and methodical, you don't kind of do these crazy volume jumps, particularly in the running, from week to week, that you allow your body the time to adapt. Because the one thing that'll slow you down more than anything is getting overuse injuries by doing too much too soon, right? I am a huge proponent of slow and steady adaptation over time. rather than, do a total of like 2 miles this week and then 10 miles next week. Is just too big of a jump, right? Think of it as just gradually, building your body over time, building your work tolerance over time. And if you sort of follow those general principles, you should see some pretty good progress. And, if it's your first marathon, your big thing with it is just finish it, right? Whether it takes you 3 hours or it takes you 5 hours, most people never do a marathon in their life, right? And the great part is whatever number you set, whatever your time is, then it just gives you something. If you continue to do them, gives you something to improve upon next time. But if your goal is to be kind of an all-around athlete, have the fun climbing and the fun challenge there, and still have a really good endurance base. You'll find too over time, as you integrate them together and start to understand yourself, you'll find that the aerobic fitness that you get from running will actually carry over, and you'll find your climbing training improves, because the better your aerobic fitness is, the better you can recover from hard efforts when you're climbing. Obviously you don't need marathon runner aerobic fitness, but most people who do short, hard things will benefit from having a little bit better aerobic fitness when it comes to recovery from hard efforts. Hopefully that was helpful to you. If you've got any more specifics that you want to know about, send me a follow-up, and I can dig into the weeds a little bit more with that one. Basically, hopefully you guys enjoyed or got something out of this first one with these questions. And, if you did, give us a rating on whatever podcast platform you listen on. We're trying to be better at this, asking for, the engagement and support and all that kind of thing that we've taken a few social media courses, and we're learning what we're supposed to do as content creators. Although that sounds so silly, doesn't it? I'm a content creator. But technically I am, because, and Catharine and I are, because we're creating content. I write stuff and people read it, and we say stuff and people listen to it, which is, when you think about it, it's just weird as shit. That we sit, in most of the case, especially during COVID, because we can't travel and interview people, we sit in our living room and talk to each other and hope that people in the world find the things we talk about interesting enough that they'll listen to it. And thankfully, over the last 3 years, enough of you have that it keeps us doing it. Keep sending in your fitness questions. In this episode, I got 3 answered, because I am fairly long-winded. And if the people had been more specific in their questions, it probably would have been even more long-winded. But I want to be specific, because if somebody asks me a question, particularly about training and fitness stuff, without the specifics, the answer almost always is, well, that depends. Does this work? Well, that depends. What's the best way to do that? Well, this depends. Because there's always more specifics that come into it, right? Like, what was your history? Where, what have you done before? Like, obviously, say somebody who was like a competitive cross-country runner who's got great running mechanics. They still run. They just have never done a marathon. Well, getting that person ready for a marathon is much easier, or it's a much simpler process, because they already know how to run. They're already running, right? All we're doing is taking a thing they're doing and making it bigger. It's like somebody riding a bike. if you already ride a bike all the time, and then you want to do a century, which is a 100-mile ride, like maybe one of these charity rides or Grand Fondo. You've never done 100 miles, but, you go out for 60K rides all the time, or you do some group rides, that kind of thing. Well, getting you ready for 100 miles, if you already ride all the time, is actually quite easy. If it's a case where you're like, hey, I other than, just sort of tootling around with my kids, I don't really ride very much, but I want to do a 100-mile ride because, a century is kind of the bicycle equivalent of a marathon. Well, then we have a whole, do you have bike shorts? What kind of bike are you riding? Does your bike fit you properly? We have this whole other amount of things to go through to get that person dialed in. So, yeah, I do ask, please send in more questions because I'm actually enjoying this. It was kind of fun. So until next time, I'm Winston. Catharine says hello from her mom's place. And until next time, remember to work hard, play dirty, and keep training because eventually this COVID bullshit will be over and we will all be able to go do stuff together again. So enjoy.